asks your mother for a New Year's Eve drunken kiss at midnight, but would also give you their spare ticket to Anfield for an FA Cup game. It's the handsome lads from Thursday Night Podcast from American Scouser TV. ASTV Tinapa, we're back again for the new year, the first of the new year. Happy New Year, Brian. Happy New Year, Trevor. How are we, boys?
Doing great.
Doing all right.
I just want to do a big shout out to our friend Alan, who hasn't been feeling well, but we're glad to have him here. I promised we'd bore him to sleep if you needed some sort of rest. That's our job tonight, which we do very well every week.
Audio NyQuil.
We are. I was going to say liquid NyQuil, but that would just be NyQuil, really, wouldn't it? We're the hardcore NyQuil. That's what we are. The Thursday night American Scouser TV. Handsome bonces all. So let's get straight into it. Our topics for tonight. We'll talk about the almost embarrassment of midfield which is Liverpool has with Curtis Jones and Harvey Elliott. We'll talk about what compares them and what contrasts them and how they might fit into the future of Liverpool. We'll also talk about the sacking of Wayne Rooney, but also how that particular generation of England players who were all touted as going to be managerial legends when they hung up their boots and have turned out to be damp squibs, bar one or two minor successes. And we'll talk about the FA Cup run that may begin on Sunday, Liverpool against Arsenal, and we'll talk about that and the magic of the Cup. And then, if we have time, Macca's more will matter because, nobody cares about that, but I do, and that's all that matters because I'm hosting it. So let's start with the boys. We talked about in preseason and stuff, we talked about the need for midfielders, and then we got Szoboszlai, and we got Endo, and we got McAllister. And probably, I think every Liverpool fan was probably guilty of not paying too much attention to Harvey Elliott and Curtis Jones being big players this year. We probably all thought they would play a part, but from the bench and in rotation now and again. But they've both stepped up fantastically and essentially, unless you want to correct me, put themselves in the frame to being starting midfielders in the Jurgen Klopp title challenging team. Let's start with Brian. We really are blessed to have these two players. Do they perform different roles? And if not, who is performing better? And if so, what are those roles? Let's have a look at the stats while we talk. Similar games played, similar goals, a few more assists for Curtis Jones, but completed passes for Jones. Surprisingly, I thought, we know he never loses the ball, but I would have thought Harvey Elliott was probably the better passer, but he's not by the looks of things. And shots per goal, I think, was the big one there. Curtis Jones a little bit more accurate than Harvey Elliott. Brian, where do you see these two wonderkins, as they say in Germany?
I'm thinking for me, Harvey Elliott is more of an heir to Mo type of player, or more of a player right there who's more of your attacking midfielder versus Curtis Jones probably being more of your classic number 8 kind of player right there. Where I would probably use him down more centrally. But I think Harvey's in the long run is probably going to be a better out wide player. Just because of how he does it, just like an out wide playmaker. I think that Curtis Jones holds the ball longer, and in my opinion, right there has a better overall stability game than Harvey does. Harvey's a player right there that's wily and runs at the players with it, runs at people, and shoots and gets shots off and makes plays. So it's a pretty much two different type of players.
Trevor, apart from the fact that fctables.com, who I have, I'm very grateful for allowing me to steal these graphics. Apart from the fact that they seem to have used the most police shots, police photographs for these two players. Like, they've just stolen a car together and they don't care what time they're doing in prison. Apart from that, what kind of impact do you think Harvey Elliott and Curtis Jones have had this season? Because they haven't just played a passing role. They've been vital in various games and in various ways, haven't they?
Yeah. Harvey has been an absolute game changer off the bench, and games that he's started, there's been a lot of positives from that as well. But I think Curtis has been the more consistent force in that starting 11. With all the signings that you spoke of, he's been the guy that you kind of never want to see dropped. He's a guy that, and we talk about him across all of the content on this channel. He's a guy that holds the ball, keeps the ball, makes the right pass, doesn't try to do too much, but can also find that little bit of magic. I don't think he's a guy that gets enough credit from the more widespread Premier League punditry, because he's kind of boring in a little sense, where he's just there's none of those highlights of Curtis Jones where it's just, oh, there's like this Rabona flick, and then there's 7 other things that end up on like a YouTube compilation. It's just very straightforward, and it's things that you need to be like you said, a Jurgen Klopp title contending team. You just got to have that foundation. And while I think Harvey's going to be more of what we're looking forward towards the future, Curtis is definitely a huge part of the present.
Brian, we talked about, like, in terms of the number 8 position, there's certain things that we would expect from a number 8. Number 1, the ability to get forward and back. Number 2, the ability to hold the ball, which is possibly something that Gravenberch and Szoboszlai might be a little bit guilty of in losing it. And McAllister definitely has that issue as well, of losing it needlessly. And then in terms of, we look at Harvey Elliott as a future Mo replacement. He definitely has the pace and the trickery, but he also has a rocket of a left foot. Do you think Jurgen Klopp is actually planning for that? And we might be talking about the big name players like Szoboszlai, and we might be talking about McAllister, but in his mind's eye, he's looking at beyond that. Maybe his possibly last great Liverpool team will be built around Elliott and Curtis Jones.
I mean, it's a good possibility. I think, just sort of thinking while I was looking at the stats and all also right there, it seems like both those players right there are kind of robbed with our formation in a way. I mean, where if we had like a 4-4-2 or where we actually had a five-man midfield, where how much they would probably benefit from being able to have the mobility, especially Harvey. I mean, with the amount of movement that he makes. I mean, I think comparably to him and Carvalho are pretty similar with style of players. I mean, now obviously Carvalho came there got the short end of the stick and kind of got moved on temporarily, now back in the club. But I think that with giving him the freedom of movement, I think that Harvey right there would probably be a beneficial player. Will Klopp change his formation? We all know the answer to that most of the time. He's the most stubborn manager with formation changes. And I don't ever think we'll see it right there, but I think that Harvey is definitely going to evolve into a more wide attacking midfielder versus like where Curtis Jones is going to be a central is like your classic central midfielder, kind of like a I'd say probably like a like we used to see from like a Xabi Alonso as a type of player, or a player that's that you don't really hear the big names from or the big things from, but they do things behind the scenes, and I think that's what we're probably going to wind up having with Curtis Jones.
In contrast to that, though, Trevor, I don't know whether we've said it here or whether we talked about it with Gali in a post-match. As fans, we're always looking for the past, comparisons to the past. Who's the next Kenny Dalglish and Ian Rush was such a big thing for me for so long. Growing up, but we've always looked for, the next Robbie Fowler or the next Steven Gerrard. Is Curtis Jones the one that's going to inherit that mantle as the Steven Gerrard especially as the Liverpool, the Anfield crowd, more than the Liverpool fan base in general, but certainly the Anfield crowd is definitely a fan base that gets behind its youth products and can build them up. Sometimes to their detriment, but Curtis Jones, if he is to be that player, he certainly seems to have the mentality to be able to handle that, doesn't he?
Yeah, and he's a guy that's kind of carried that burden for a while, just being the scouser that kind of has to hold the mantle. Like Trent has kind of over time taken a bit of that away from him, but he's one of those guys where there was always that glimmer of, okay, this is a guy who gets it, but can he ever put it together? And for every game that he would have where you're like, all right, this is the kid that can really maybe be like a captain material type of deal where he's taking charge of everything and he's putting people in the right spots and all that. And then the next game, it would just be an absolute nightmare. I think he's kind of put that inconsistency behind him. His poor games this year are few and far between the end of last season and this season. You never see him really have two bad games in a row. Probably don't even see him have two bad halves in a row. There will be kind of just that one like half an hour period where you hope he doesn't make an error that kind of sours people on him for everything else good that he does, because they'll, of course, hyper focus as that kind of guy that they're putting a lot of their hopes on of, hey, this is kind of the local lad. We want to make sure that he gets all of this, both praise, but he accepts the responsibility of, hey, you're kind of representing us as a whole. And when you can't fulfill that expectation, we're going to come down on you a little bit harder. I think going forward, he's going to be that guy where you're going to look to him as that kind of middle of the park coach. Whereas you're always going to have guys up front that are going to do their own thing, especially in Klopp's system. And you have, for now, you got Virgil at the back, who's the de facto captain, and you have Allison, who kind of runs so many things. So if you can have Jones be that guy for the midfield, I think that's huge.
A very warm welcome to Hassan here as well before we get to Brian. Brian, let's switch over to Harvey Elliott a little bit. We talked before about, he needed more minutes. He was doing enough to get more minutes. He has a fantastic impact off the bench. And the danger sometimes is with a player like that they may get restless, and they may, as we saw with Kelleher, rumors start flying about whether they're happy with the role they have to play. Now, obviously, Mo Salah, we're looking at, even if he signs another contract, he's not going to be here for much, much longer. Is it possible that Klopp has been talking to him all this time and said, ignore all the press talk. When Mo goes, that's your spot. You're going to be the guy.
I'm not really sure whether Klopp's that type of player, the type of manager. I think that Klopp expects a lot of work rate, and wants everybody to say, hey, that there's a possibility you can do it, to kind of that kind of carrot to keep on driving the hunger. Because I think that if you tell a player naturally that that's going to be their spot right there, they're just going to come in there and put their foot off the gas and say, I'll just hang out, wait for it and all that. But you kind of keep all your players in constant competition with each other right there to make sure that, hey, you might be that player, but this guy next to you might be that player. It could be Paul Gleitzel right there, maybe the next player. It could be, you just name the names and stuff like that of youth players that are similar to the same age group right there that Harvey is. I think that Harvey's hungry enough right there that to drive himself. I mean, he loves the club. I mean, he's a boyhood supporter. I think that if he's in love that he's here playing right there, and I think that right there is probably enough hunger for him to strive to that. But I still think that Klopp's going to actually put that whole thing and say, yeah, you're the heir apparent, because that just creates egos and creates problems, and that's a thing that Klopp tries to bust down in his club.
I'm just trying to figure out why he got the frosted tips in his hair. that goes with that position.
Hey, he's got hair, so I'm kind of jealous of the frosted tips.
Yes, that's true. That is true. Trevor, if we look at not just Curtis and Harvey, let's look beyond them. Trent obviously is going to be a big major player going forward as long as we retain him. Kwanzaa looks like he's going to be fantastic for us. We've seen with Ben Doak that there's talent in the ranks behind the senior team. Is it too early to say that we may look at another so-called golden generation for Liverpool to go along with the Fowler, McManaman, Redknapp era and Rob Jones, where you could build a team around young players as long as they stayed healthy? Or is that just a myth that's probably never going to happen again in this day and age of billions of dollars in transfers?
I think you can get that good mix, and with the way our ownership group works, I think you're going to have to find that mix, because as much as you kind of want that constant flow of reinforcements to the transfer market, I just don't think it's going to be something where there's going to be that investment in each window where it's going to be, all right, we got all those midfield groceries that in the summer going into this. It's like, okay, you got all this. Now, if you have anything that you need to take care of, we're going to have the youth do it this time, because you can't just rack up that bill the way that some of these other clubs can. And yeah, there's, especially with what we got going on with the Asian Cup and the AFCON, there's going to be lots of opportunities for these guys to really just shine and show what they can do. And we have four competitions to do it in. So I'm hoping that there's a decent amount of rotation throughout all these, and that all these guys really just take advantage of the opportunities that they're going to be given, because it's going to really factor into kind of both how the roster is constructed going into the second half of this season and next year.
Alan says it could be a class of 24 of a couple more academy kids come through this year. So, Brian, let's expand that world a little bit. In terms of what we're producing, and I think we've touched on this before on this particular show, it really does speak well to how the academy, number one, is being run, number two, how they're doing the recruitment, but also number three, how they seem to be focusing on local players that the fans can get behind, and maybe even go and attend the academy games, knowing that those guys are from down the street. They're their families that they might know, and then can carry them through. So when they do have bad times, whereas at other clubs they may get buried by their own fans, not mentioned or anything like that. But at Liverpool, young players will look at that and go, do you know what, I want to play for that club, because if I make a mistake, I'm not going to get booed off the stage on the very first game, and if I do well, they're going to love me almost forever.
I think the best thing that this club ever did was move out of Melwood, and as a whole right there, and move everybody into one facility at Kirkby. So the best thing they ever did right there, because you have these youth players who are able to go there to see the senior players play. They're able to go there and see that touching distance right there of there. All the way down from like from the U16s to the U18s to U21s over to the senior squad. They constantly go there to see that progression of what they can achieve and all that. And I think our academies run really great. On the tail end, like what Al was saying right there, there's a couple players that we have are very, very special in the ranks that we recruited. I think that Bobby Clark is going to be amazing. He's got a good head on his shoulder, coming from a very good Newcastle bloodline. We've got lots of potential there, and I think that it's just, as like Trevor said, it's melding the potential there with the senior players right there to get a good mix. And we have so many competitions coming up that that we need to go there and actually exercise that by putting these guys in there. We'll start off on Sunday. But we'll touch that later right there. But I think that we need to go in there and actually get these guys that little bit of touch and stuff like that. And preseason starts one thing, and then you just let these guys just progress by watching the senior players.
Trevor, we talked yesterday on the EPL panel show, and then Gally mentioned in the pre-match again before the Newcastle game that they have that Millie is his name, I think. Is it Millie, the young 16, 17-year-old? And he's looks like a very, very good player, very good talent, Trevor, but he's all on his own. How important is it for a young player to look around the field on their debut or their first few games in the first team and to look and see, oh, that's the central midfielder I played with 2 years ago. That's the left back I passed to a year ago. To have that group, how important is it going to be for everybody's confidence, for the young players to know that they're coming up together rather than they're kind of, they're the cheeky young scamp in the dressing room with all these senior, mature players?
Yeah, and it's something where you can kind of breed a culture that way, where get your pats on the back. These kids come through, and there's kind of like a kind of cutthroat atmosphere when it comes to academies, especially in the UK, across all of it, where you have guys that are like trying to just figure out where they want to apply their trade, and they have a lot of, especially the really talented ones, have multiple teams coming in for them. And if they can see kind of the pipeline that Liverpool possesses, where there's just tangible evidence of, if you come in and you perform, you're going to get opportunities. There's no like real log jam. Any position that you thought was completely stopped, like going into the season, you look at left back. If you're a left back academy kid and you go, okay, there's no way I'm going to leapfrog Robertson or Simicast, but then they both get hurt, and now you have that chance for a kid like Luke Chambers to come in and really just go, all right, I have a month to kind of put myself in the shop window for Klopp, as maybe next year you can move on from Simicast, or you can hear offers for him and go, okay, we've seen what we have for this kid, and it's fiscally irresponsible if somebody comes in with money for Costas, and we can kind of keep that ball rolling that way. And while you're making money, you're also showing that anything that you do on the academy level is not going to go without a reward. And in the end, if you are going to just integrate all these players in over and over again, you have to show them that there are actual opportunities, and it's not just, well, if you work really hard, we may give you a sniff, because it's all lip service bullshit if you don't actually show it on the senior level.
So Brian, just to finish up this portion, if you're a parent, just in a hypothetical, if you're a parent in Britain or Ireland or maybe Germany with the Klopp connection, or Holland with the Pep Linders connection, and you're looking around, your kid is a talented kid, and they're being sought after by a lot of scouts, they're being looked at by a lot of scouts. Is Liverpool, outside of the subjectivity of us being Liverpool supporters, just on the evidence alone, is Liverpool looking like a lot better prospect to bring your kid along and sign them up for that academy than, let's say, City or Chelsea or Spurs or Arsenal?
We have to kind of get real with what the academies have done. I mean, their overall academy right there is a product right there. You maybe have like one out of a group of 100 kids that come through the academy right there is going to actually make it to become a superstar. I mean, a world-class player. So I mean, it's how they groom them. I think that Chelsea right there, what they did with their academy players was kind of brutal. I mean, they just like bought and just churned them out, almost like it's like a meat factory, basically how they did it. And City kind of the same thing. I mean, only a couple players actually came through that City side that, and obviously you see like that. See, like Jadon Sancho, players like that, that were at City, and they just said, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to get the hell out of there," and then went to Dortmund right there when they had the chance to before they signed their senior contract. So kind of Yeah, I mean, with it, I mean, out of that group right there, like Phil Foden has been like one of the main players that's went through, but you have like Palmer, Cantor took the chance to go into Chelsea, which I'm still dumbfounded by. But I mean, it's I think that we don't really see that. I mean, yeah, we've had some players like like Brewster, that Jordan Ibe and stuff like that, who that we kind of had in the academy ranks came through, and they kind of made it, but then they had a little bit of attitude issues or whatever happened through there, and we moved them out. But I mean, you have to overall go what the academy business is. I mean, it's to make money in a way. I mean, to generate funds to recruit more, and to generate funds to recruit more. I mean, it's just the process it is.
So let's leave the golden generation, possible golden generation of Liverpool, and talk about the golden generation of England and their travails in the management sector. We'll start specifically with this chap here. Sacked this week after only 15 games. We are not responsible for you throwing up your dinner after watching this fixture. We're really apologising for that, but we have to see him. But yeah, after 15 games, I don't believe his record was that hot in the MLS either. And in Derby, I know there are extenuating circumstances in the boardroom and stuff, but even still, there are managers who have coped with a lot more strenuous circumstances and still had some sort of success. We can add Frank Lampard if we look at that particular golden generation team. Frank Lampard, Steven Gerrard. Beckham hasn't touched management as far as I know. John Terry is just a coach, and Ashley Cole, I believe, has a good reputation as a coach. But what we don't see there is the Neville boys. I can't see there. The Gary and Phil, again, varying rates of success in terms of achieving anything at all. But none of them, apart from Gerrard winning the title with Rangers, which was. He was playing against Neil Lennon's Celtic, not any good Celtic team, but the Neil Lennon Celtic team. They haven't done much in terms of management. And yet, fans of their clubs, including ours, probably not now at this point because of the Saudi Arabia thing and not only the politics of that, but how poor he's doing over there, but will clamour for ex-players of these golden generations to become the managers in the future. So, Brian, we'll start with you, or Trevor, we'll start with you. Is there too much attached to the playing career of a player in terms of what they may do as a manager and coach? Should we get rid of that idea, given how many managers and coaches have been successful who haven't played in not only like in a golden generation, but even professional football at all? Or is it just that particular generation of English players were flawed, went through a flawed coaching system, which the English FA system had been for so long? And is it possible that there is a generation of English top-notch players who will become the Pep Guardiolas of the future?
I think as it stands, a lot of those guys are going to keep getting work because of the ownership groups that are coming into the sport kind of look at those England sides as they're kind of almost doing the Saudi Arabian WWE booking where they go, oh, I remember this guy from 1999. I want him. Well, he's kind of broken down. He's not that great. But no, I know him. I played with him in a video game, and it was great. And now I have $7 billion. I would like him. Well, he went 2-15 in his last 17 MLS games, so probably not. No, but everybody's going to know him, and it's going to sell merchandise. And there's kind of just like a disconnect with what is necessary in terms of building a club and putting together something that has staying power, where they kind of just want that real quick jolt. And Birmingham, for what it was, when they canned the guy that had him in fifth, it kind of just tore them apart because they seemingly had no issues. Really like playing for the guy that, like you said,
John Eustace. John Eustace, yeah.
And it kind of just derailed everything just because the new ownership group kind of wanted to just swing their dicks a little bit. And you're trying to just, and that's happened so many times with everybody that we've talked about, and that with Gerrard and Lampard of, it's a club legend, so we're really going to rally the fan base around this guy. Or, you've watched him score a great goal, so he of course can teach people that aren't as good as him. It's the old Michael Jordan theory of like, he could never be a coach because his expectations of players are always going to be the expectations he had of himself, and they're never going to reach them, so they'll never be good enough in his eyes, and he'll never be able to utilize what they can do properly. And some of these guys, I don't think will ever kind of rewire themselves to be able to get players to kind of play within their means, because they always think that, they can just do everything I did. And when they can't, it's like, oh man, you guys stink.
Brian, it may have escaped your attention, but just to remind you, I am not from America. I'm from that country, foreign, I think it's called. I'm from foreign. But as a non-American watching, I've only a passing interest in American sports. It's pretty much soccer or nothing for me. Soccer or boxing or nothing for me. Maybe darts now and again if I'm feeling nostalgic for 1987. But it seems to me that, let's say NFL for the best example, because I know more. The best NFL coaches weren't Super Bowl winners. Like Bill Belichick didn't even play professional football. He was a college player, if I remember correctly. Vince Lombardi wasn't a professional NFL player. And I can't imagine anybody who has a big name for themselves in the history of the game came from like 12 Super Bowl rings or whatever on their fingers. It seems to me that at least in American sports, the idea of the separation between what's a coaching skill and what's a playing skill is very defined. It's, you're a coach. We don't care where you came from. If you've been leading high school teams to championship after championship, we'll give you a shot at the college level. If you've been leading college teams to championship after championship, we'll have a look at you as maybe an attacking coordinator or offensive coordinator, whatever you call them. At the NFL level, if you succeed there, we'll give you the head coach position. We don't care what you did as a player. We want to know that you can marshal 48 men or whatever the number is every week for every season. But that doesn't exist in soccer, really, does it? Certainly not in Anglo soccer, let's say, for want of a better term. British, American soccer, anything that's influenced by the English FA still seems to tie knowledge and ability as a manager and coach into what they did as players. What is America getting right that the English game isn't still to this day?
I think that you can even go back to start thinking about as far as like even Jurgen Klopp. Klopp wasn't a prominent player when he went through. I mean, he became a better manager. And I think a lot of times when you get with a world-class player, you come up with a world-class ego at the same time. I mean, even the people that we like, as Trevor said right there, the expectations are that you're gonna be like me. You're gonna do everything. And if you don't, if the player doesn't do that, they get frustrated with it. And I think that you have to go with American sports right there. I guess you could say that we have certain elements of, hey, you sit down, you learn, you study from this guy, you go there, and then you keep on pressing. I mean, we even had that even in football with Sir Bobby Robson. I mean, look how many managers have actually learned from him and learned the steps and process right there. I think there's some likeness there, but with I mean, again, you don't have the ego coaches right there. I mean, that come through. I mean, you can even go down to the list of like the player, like managers who've won a lot. I mean, Sir Alex Ferguson wasn't a prominent footballer. I mean, when he took over the reins at Aberdeen, moved up to Manchester United. I mean, he wasn't a prominent footballer. So, I mean, I think that Weird Al, we just have, it's like, has to say, right, what Trevor was saying with the Saudi Arabia thing. Okay, I'm going to go grab Steven Gerrard because everybody knows who Steven Gerrard is. I'm going to go grab this guy because Frank Lampard, because, he was the best central midfielder at one point here, and he'll do the same thing for my club. It's not the case. I mean, you need to go out there, learn from the trenches, go out there and study your badges, and go out there, move up in the ranks that way. And I think that quick advances that they've given, that the English game has given, it doesn't work right. I mean, and that you see that by the failures of of those players. I mean, the Neville brothers. I mean, like you said right there, mentioned. I mean, with that, I mean, Phil did a disaster with the English women's side. I mean, they were atrocious with that. I mean, so you deal with that. I mean, Gary with Valencia. I mean, horrible. I mean, that. I mean, say right there. I mean, I'm still not sold with Southgate, but he did get some progression with them right there. But again, this goes back to how you can work with players. I mean, and the way Southgate did with Trent, still not a fan.
Trevor, in terms of let's if we talk about golden generations, let's solidify into one club. Because a common argument I have had tons and tons of times with Liverpool supporters as well, as much as anybody else, especially about Steven Gerrard, because I was never convinced Steven Gerrard would be the manager that he was in terms of stature, as he was as a player in terms of stature, is that they spent a lot of time learning from the best. But in the modern game, nobody was better than Alex Ferguson, and his coaching tree, which is a phrase I picked up from NFL coaching, like his proteges, Paul Ince, Mark Robson, Mark Robson as well. Actually, I don't think about it. Mark Hughes, Ryan Giggs, Wayne Rooney, the Neville brothers, Roy Keane. It's Brian Robson. There we go. That's what I was thinking of. It's not a fantastic evidence for learning under the guise of a great manager producing itself as a second generation. Is that something that may have just been a trait of those Manchester United players because they had everything handed to them and they were super talented and could probably never understand why other players weren't as talented as they were? Or does that just bust that myth entirely, that what you do as a manager and a coach is entirely up to how you approach that position and nothing to do with who you worked or played under as a player?
I agree. The coaching tree is the biggest fallacy in sports, where he played under this guy, or he worked under this guy. Now he immediately has credibility. We've seen it in so many different sports, in so many different fashions, just fall completely flat on its face. And it's something where I really think it's just lazy front offices and lazy ownership, where they just go, I've seen this great coach or this great manager be able to kind of carry on for as long as they have, and they've done all these things, and they've groomed all these great players and gotten the best out of them, in sometimes raising up their levels to probably parts that they couldn't have done under another manager or another club. And they think it's instantly going to translate, instead of just kind of focusing on what their actual ecosystem is, where you're going to have guys that are used to the way a certain team trains. They're used to a way a certain team travels. And when you try to inject somebody new into that system, and they kind of want to shake everything up and kind of do it their way, and it goes wrong, and they're sitting there going, what happened? Well, you did training a certain way for 25 years, and then you still have some holdover players, you still have holdover staff, you have all these things, and then you have a guy come in that you signed to put on newspapers. I know, antiquated reference, but regardless. And when everything goes wrong and you're going, I don't know how this could have gone wrong. It's like, well, you do. You just don't want to admit that you made a wrong choice. And and it kind of just put this snowball effect of wrong choices. When you could have made the less sexy hire. Or like, oh, you have this guy that coached with your guy for 2 years, and instead of giving him the opportunity because you had a guy that everybody knows available, and you figured that would steal more headlines, these guys kind of just make their own problems. And I think it has to come down to better just understanding of club culture, of as weird as it sounds, talk to your players, talk to your staff, go like, hey, we're potentially gonna either fire this guy or bring this guy in. You know, people talk, everybody talks in all the industries. You know how a certain guy will think. If that doesn't line up with what your players or staff or culture are going to be, don't do it just to do it. And a lot of times these teams are just kind of cutting up their nose to spite their face, and they kind of deserve when it blows up.
Speaking about cutting noses off to spite faces, we talk about managers who stick to their guns no matter what, and we're going to face one of those managers on Saturday. We have the FA Cup game, Arsenal against Liverpool. It'll be on ESPN Plus. The magic of the cup for me, being a Euro, is it's a special competition, and it's one that I love dearly. And I was explaining last night that back in the day, in the 80s, they would make BBC would make a whole morning of it. They'd have the kids' cartoon shows till about 10 a.m., 9 a.m., 10 a.m. And then from 10 till 3, it was all FA Cup. And they'd follow the teams. They'd have cameras on the buses going from their hotel to the old Wembley Stadium. They'd show highlights of the games, like, the goals of the games from the previous rounds. They'd have special celebrity guests doing little like punditry beforehand who they thought would win. And they made a great occasion of it. And I think sometimes it's something that doesn't get translated over here. So with that said, we've heard, Brian, we've heard what you thought about the cup, I think, already, maybe on or off air. I can't remember. I think it was off air before we came on air. But let's bring it out into the open. How are you approaching this cup as a supporter, and how do you hope Klopp approaches the cup?
I want to win the competition, but realistically, I also know that in the long run, what are our goals as a club? I mean, we want to win the league, and that's our biggest chief goal. Second goal after that would be winning the Europa League. Third goal after that would probably be, since we've progressed so far, is to win the League Cup. I mean, so with our squad rotating players. So how would I go across this FA Cup? I would rotate the hell out of this squad right there. I mean, to a point where that if we go there and lose the match, it won't be a drastic hurt to us right there, because that we have the congestion of matches in January already. We're already missing Endo, we're missing Mo. I mean, we have Joe Gomez as the only healthy left back at the moment. I mean, you have Slobozai right there who's probably not going to play because of the injury. I mean, we have to go through and start reserving bodies, to get through this. So, I mean, in my opinion, play a mix of kids and play Harvey. Go there, play these guys right there. The ones that only get these like off the bench minutes and stuff like that. Put in Nunez in there because he needs to go out there as many minutes as he can to try to get it in the back of the net. I mean, things like that right there. That's what we need to approach it by. Don't play Allison. Play Kelleher. Get Kelleher the minutes that he needs to. I mean, if we're going to shop window Kelleher, shop window the hell out of him right there, so that that if we're going to sell him in the summertime, that he gets these matches to go there ahead of him, so he can highlight himself like that. But that's where I'm at with it. I mean, if we win, great. If we lose, I'm not going to be heartbroken.
Trevor, in terms of that kind of rotation that Brian is talking about, I mean, it would make a lot of sense if you were playing like Wealdstone or Oxford United, but is there a special thing about playing Arsenal that would maybe tempt Klopp to play a full force team, or do you agree with Brian and we should just play what we play and then see where the chips fall in the end?
Yeah, I think that just the kind of romanticism of the quadruple chase, especially with how close we came a couple of years ago, there's always gonna be that temptation to kind of go for it, and especially drawing Arsenal this early in the competition. I think in normal instances, Klopp would kind of just be goaded into going in with like a eight person normal starting 11, and then you kind of sprinkle 3 kids in there with Kelleher being in goal. I just don't think he has the luxury of that at this point. There's so many more important games ahead of us. And as stupid as it sounds, yeah, the League Cup is more important right now. The Europa League is more important. And where we are in those stages of the competition, plus with kind of keeping bodies healthy for a league charge while a lot of these guys get healthy, especially at the back. And while we don't have Endo and Mo, I really don't want to kind of just lay down the sword in the third round against a team like Arsenal, where you're going to have both that team and that fan base kind of charged up for it. I really don't even want to put the thought in my head of Lego Head doing his fake Klopp air punches after a victory. I just don't even want to kind of, the fact that I even spoke it into possible existence kind of makes me physically ill. I don't, but I in the end, I agree with Brian. I don't want to expend all those resources for something that could ultimately bear no fruit. There's no real reason to go at this particular match full force. And yeah, if we can take them down with 4 out of 11 normal starters, then Arsenal is an even bigger pretender than we thought. But if it's not the case, it's not meant to be, then at least, yeah, we shop window Kelleher and some of these young guys that we were just talking about like 20 minutes ago kind of get that big match experience that they can kind of just springboard off of.
Brian, let's flip the coin a little bit. How do you think Arsenal approach this game? Does Arteta also have the same philosophy, do you think, because he wants to keep up a league challenge and because Spurs, if they have any sort of resurgence, are going to be breathing down his neck fairly soon? I think they're only a point behind or something like that, or 2 points or something. Or does he think, look at this and say, this is a trophy we can win and I'm going to put out the full strength side. And if I pay the price for it down the road, I pay the price for it.
I talk about what you were talking about earlier about of how the whole day was filled up with the images of the cup and stuff like that. Kind of like things that we saw when we were kids with the Super Bowl here in the U.S. I mean, the romanticism of the cup, almost like the romanticism of the Super Bowl, have kind of died down in a lot of major sports. I mean, like that, and I think that now you have to go back to reality of how many matches for this right here for the FA Cup. How many matches do these players play in a year? What kind of resource management do you need? Does the FA Cup payout more than the Europa Cup payout, or more than the payout that you had from like the Champions League or the Premier League?
I think they get $10.
Yeah,
each.
Exactly. I mean, so you got to think about, okay, yeah, the Grandeur right there, you get your name etched on the cup and all that. But again, it goes down to the thing. It's all about money. It's all about finance. I mean, stuff like that. What is gonna progress the cup for the club further? Winning the league or winning the FA Cup? I mean, we all want silverware, but what silverware is more important? I mean, it's a weighing game right there. And so, I mean, I think that Arsenal's going to go the same exact route as we thought we are. I don't think that Arteta is going to risk his some the health of his squad. That midfield's fragile anyway. I mean, why would you risk that midfield against us? I mean, I can see them scattering their players kind of like how we're playing. I mean, I don't see Rhea playing right now with them. I see them rotating keepers. I see them rotating players, and I think you're going to basically see a not quite a second string squad, but I think you're going to see a mixed squad from both sides in this match because they both know there's more at stake.
Trevor, with that in mind, if you agree with that, from Arsenal's point of view, if both managers put out those kind of teams, is it going to be a war of youthful attrition, or is Liverpool's young players and second string players, do they have a little bit more than Arsenal's bench or second string players to maybe get this over the line in a surprising fashion, which might encourage us then going down into the next round to make, maybe we will do the quadruple this year.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to what we were saying before in terms of the roles and the impacts that our youth guys have had this year so far, where even if it's in a substitute role or if it's in kind of spot starts, and we'll go back to Harvey as the main example, a guy that I think if he's probably gonna start this match, and going against a second string Arsenal backline is something he has to just be salivating about, because they're shaky when they're full strength, and having those holes is going to be something where he's going to be trying to get goals. And I think it's just a confidence boost. I actually disagree with the notion that Arteta is going to heavily rotate, because I think he's just so arrogant enough right now. He hasn't had that time to kind of be knocked down a peg, despite the collapse from last year. I still think in his head, he goes, I can run these guys over and over and over again. They're young enough where we can kind of just be ever present on all fronts. And I don't know if it's going to just come to fruition, if he thinks that they're never going to completely fall apart. But I agree that they probably should take the same road that we will do with the mixed bag, but I'm not so sure that he's going to do it.
Before we head into the moral dilemma and then get out of here for the fantasy football show, Brian, what's your score prediction for that FA Cup game? Or could you possibly even give one with not knowing what the teams will be?
I really can't give one right there, not knowing what's going to come out there. I mean, it depends. I think if Arsenal comes there and play like Trevor said right there with a full squad, and we play with a rotating squad, I think Arsenal will probably win 3-1. I mean, I think that they have that much advantage right there with Saka versus our second string. I think that Odegaard in the midfielder against. I mean, overall, if you judge that, yeah, this is kids against kids. I mean, I think that we got definitely a good shot right there. I mean, of doing it, of winning, or at least go there getting a draw out of it. So it just all depends on who plays and who doesn't play. But I mean, again, with the result, I really honestly am not concerned either how the chips fall. If it does, if we win, great. If we don't, great.
Trevor,
I'm going with it, regardless of what teams end up over there, 1-1 draw, and we're gonna have just a game that is going to be easily forgotten for everybody, just because it's the marquee tie of the round. But we'll see how it's going to come down to basically what I said before, how Arsenal puts their team out. If it's what I think it's going to be, I think we could kind of sneak up on them with substitutes, but we'll see. I'm going to go 1-1 draw.
I don't have a score prediction. My only hope is that we don't get any injuries. That's the only thing I care about.
Yeah.
So very quickly before we go, it's a a one-answer question, Macca's moral dilemma, as we talked about earlier, just to kind of recap the show. Brian, who would you rather be managed by, Wayne Rooney or Frank Lampard?
I'm unmanageable.
Yeah, there you go. That's a good answer. Trevor?
I'll probably go with Rooney, just because I'll know that I can't be any worse of a player than he is as a manager. So there's never going to be that level of disappointment in myself.
I'm going to go with Rooney simply because both of my grannies are dead.
Oh!
And on that bombshell, as the old saying goes, just remains to say thank you to everybody for watching. Make sure you're following us on the YouTube and on the Facebook and the Instagram and X, formerly known as Twitter. The fantasy football show is coming up presently, immediately after us. Thank you, Brian, for joining us, and thank you, Trevor, as always, for joining us. Make sure you're liking and subscribing. Smash the button or tap it nice and gently if you have a sensitive keyboard. And make sure you're following all of our content. The Friday morning show is not this week, I think. I think this week is the coffee show is off. Or is somebody taking it? We'll figure that out. But if it's on, watch it, because it's very, very good. It's sponsored by Reckless Coffee. But we will be back with the normal programming next week. So enjoy the game. If you're in the Northeast, don't enjoy the snow. Don't overexert yourself. And if you have a spare snowblower, send it my way. Other than that, peace out, everybody. And here's the 70s porn.